Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pluris community meeting to provide updates to the community of Wedgefield on the acquisition of Pluris. I am Emily Bonilla, your County Commissioner for District 5, and I have several individuals here with me from utilities, and I will turn it over to Tim Armstrong, who will introduce who we have and provide the presentation with the updates for you. I will say that this is definitely a project that I have worked really hard on since being elected and even beforehand, and I'm very happy with staff and the progress that we've made. So I'm excited about Tim presenting this information to you and having this update available to you. This will be recorded, by the way, and provided on my YouTube channel so that people who didn't make this live virtual session can see it in the future. And I will now turn it over to Tim.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So as Commissioner mentioned, my name is Tim Armstrong. I'm the Assistant Director at Orange County Utilities. Some folks have probably already met me. As the Commissioner mentioned, we've been involved with this topic for quite some time. I do have an outstanding professional engineer on the phone with me tonight as well from Utilities, Mr. Tad Parker. He is part of this project and is helping me from an engineering standpoint. We also have some folks from our attorneys group, also our real estate group, and there's going to be others probably joining as well. They're going to be part of our acquisition team that the county has put together when we do approach Pluris formally. So what I wanted to start with is just those introductions, and first off, just take a little bit of understanding about Orange County Utilities. We've been in business, I think, since 1957. It's about 63 years. We had a name change a couple of times over that, but we've been Orange County Utilities for quite some time. And I wanted to take the opportunity, because you don't get this opportunity very often, to share one introductory slide with the group that kind of understands what we're all about. So we had the, you should see the slide with the J.D. Power. We obviously in the middle of a global pandemic that started mid-March, so we've had a lot of bad news over a very protracted period of time. But in May of this year, we were notified by J.D. Power and Associates. Everybody kind of knows what J.D. Power does. They do customer surveying, and then they take those surveys and they determine who some of the best companies are in the nation. And the survey they did for the 2020 water utility for residential customer satisfaction survey they did, I'm proud to tell you that Orange County Utilities was #1 in the South region. And what they do is they do questions and rate utilities, the top 90 utilities in the country that serve populations of over 400,000. And we won our South region, and we also had the #1 overall score in the United States. And you can see some of the top 5 or 6 there: Orange County, Florida being #1, Gwinnett County, Georgia, our neighbors and friends, Orlando Utilities Commission, New York City, significantly larger, but we seem to beat them out, Aqua South, and Miami-Dade. And I can tell you that our score was the highest score that they've had in the 5-year history of this, of the survey. So our background, it's not a customer survey. It says customer satisfaction, but it pretty much encompasses the entire utility, from things like the way we communicate, the way we bill and collect payments, the way we deal with a bunch of different things, the way we do water treatment, the way we do conservation initiatives, our pricing, things like that. And I thought it was important to open that up to the group, because a lot of things that some of the Wedgefield residents have complained about over time is what we'll get to in a second. So we'll go over the background, timeline, process phases, current assumptions that we have, our consultant phase 1 findings, and a homeowner cost estimate as we sit currently. A little bit of background. You'll see this slide denotes the parcel, all the parcels of the area we're talking about. The colors in this picture do mean something. Some of the brownish lighter colors are commercial customers that are occupied, and other ones that are light beige that are not occupied when this table was made. And then you have the blue and the green thatch. Those are us doing some analysis about the number of parcels and the parcels that were occupied by homeowners, owners of homes versus renters. And you probably are all aware that the Wedgefield area was first started by Allstate Development Corp in the early 60s as Rocket City. And it was billed as a 20,000 acre development that would house Kennedy Space Center staff. And that's a plat that I pulled from one of the original Rocket City plats that I pulled out of the public record. The utilities in this area has always been privately held since inception. And I provided a couple of different changes from Wedgefield Utilities to Pluris. Pluris Holdings bought the utility in 2009, and then the Wedgefield changed in name in 2018 to Pluris Wedgefield LLC. A little bit of background: Pluris Holdings LLC is a private for-profit utility company. They're corporately headquartered in Dallas, Texas. You'll see the star. That's where they're corporately located, but they do have 6 utilities in 3 states. They have 1 in Alabama, 2 in Florida, and 3 in North Carolina. And the one in Florida with the red dot is the Wedgefield location. Pluris Wedgefield LLC, they do water and wastewater services to approximately 1,800 parcels. You'll see that number, and you also see a number of about 1,765 parcels is the number that we're using for tonight's presentation, but it's in the neighborhood of 1,800 parcels. Regulatory oversight for rates is done by the Florida Public Service Commission, and the PSC has approved a rate of return or rate on equity of 8.36% for Pluris. That's something that is talked about in the past, but Pluris as a private company is entitled to a rate of return, which is dictated by the PSC or approved by the PSC. And as far as operations and water quality, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, or FDEP, has oversight for the operations of Pluris currently and the water quality. And the ongoing concerns that have been voiced by Wedgefield residents are water quality, water aesthetics, high rates in pricing, and lack of responsive customer service. That's one of the reasons I wanted to put the J.D. Power Award, because about service, pricing, those are some of the metrics that we're measured on nationally. And I wanted the folks on the call to be aware of that. So a timeline, I put together a timeline. The timeline starts in 2016. I don't want anybody on the phone call to be offended to when I start with 2016. I do realize there was a lot of interaction and some concern about the quality well prior to 2016, but for the purposes of tonight's discussion, we're going to start in the 2016 timeframe. And it started in April of 2016 when our Environmental Protection Division conducted some water sampling out in the Wedgefield area after some complaints from constituents. The county put together a Wedgefield FAQ in June. Pluris at that time released their remedy action plan, and FDEP held an open house in Wedgefield. In August of 2016, we prepared a customer cost analysis, a very early version of that. We held joint meetings with utilities, HOA boards, and the District 5 commissioner. In September, we did the HOA community meetings commenced. We did several, I want to say 5 or 6 community meetings out there. At the time, my engineering counterpart was Mr. Todd Swingle. He's actually left Orange County Utilities. He's now the executive director of Toho Water Authority in Osceola County. So we still collaborate on regional issues. So he's still in the loop for other things. In October, the HOA board requested that the BCC for our Orange County BCC for a formal review into acquisition. In November of that same year, we had a District 5 discussion at the BCC. Fast forward to 2017, in January, we had a BCC meeting to discuss Pluris Wedgefield Inc.'s acquisition and next steps. And in December, Wedgefield HOA turned in over 1,200 non-binding letters of support for further research into the acquisition of Pluris Wedgefield Inc. And that period of time in 2017, there was a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of hard work by the Wedgefield residents. Some of the names of the people, Pam DiMarzio and some others, I don't want to miss anybody, but there was a lot of a community effort out there to go door to door to put these non-binding letters in front of people and get signatures to determine whether or not folks were interested in us moving forward. And that letter was non-binding, and there were 1,200. So that's critical, because out of the 1,800, to get this utility purchased and get it on an MSBU, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, you need 67% of your total partial owners. So it's critical to get a high number of return, and to show that you got 1,200 people involved and interested in signing the non-binding letter. That's very important. In 2018 of August, we issued a RFP, or request for proposal, for an opinion of value of Pluris Wedgefield Inc. water and wastewater system. In November, that RFP, which you see denoted there, was awarded to Hartman Consultants LLC. Hartman is the consultant that the county is using to assess the Wedgefield water and wastewater system. In December of 2018, that's when Pluris did their conversion from a C Corp to a LLC. That was the name change that I captured on one of the first slides. Fast forward to 2019, April, we reviewed the effluent disposal easement contract amendment between Pluris Wedgefield and the golf and restaurant. In May, Hartman, our consultant, completed the phase 1 value consulting report for Pluris Wedgefield Inc. And that report is about an inch thick document that outlined a bunch of things that we'll talk about today. There was a project update done with the District 5 Commissioner in July. In October, we reviewed the phase 1 findings with our county administrator and the administration. In December, we did a project update again with District 5 Commissioner, and we reviewed a draft BCC presentation with the mayor in December. Fast forwarding to 2020, in January, the project update, we did another one with Commissioner District 5. In February, we had all district commissioner briefings. We briefed all 6 commissioners, and then we did a BCC presentation in February of 2020. At that point, we asked for direction, and the outcome of that February meeting was moving on to phase 2, and we did a change order to authorize the start of phase 2 with Hartman Consultant LLC, our consultant. In April, we had a Wedgefield HOA meeting scheduled, but was canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The thought was, just like everybody else, that we would do meetings in person, and the meeting in April was canceled. And since March, we've been doing quite a lot of things virtually. I can tell you that utilities hasn't missed a beat. We've actually been working. We sent a lot of folks teleworking. All of our call center is working from their homes respectively. We've got, I would say, a third to a half of our staff working virtually. It's been the silver lining on the whole issue with COVID. In June, Pluris Wedgefield submits to the Florida PSC their 2020 price indexing. And we looked at that, and we provided a project update to the county administration in July. We worked on the development of the county acquisition and negotiation management leaders, some of which are on the call today. We wanted to put together a cross-functional group of an attorney, real estate, professional engineers, business folks, O&M folks together so we could approach Pluris. And we, the Commissioner District 5 in July mailed the letter in opposition to the Florida PSC for the price indexing that they just did, which was about a 1% to 1.25% increase on water and wastewater rates, which are going to be reflected in the presentation. In August, we started working on a development for an RFP for legal acquisition of legal services. The thought is we would use an outside counsel, with more discussion and more experience with utility acquisition, and that's in process. And then it takes us to today, where in September, where we're doing this community meeting WebEx. So I want to go over the process phases that we shared with the board. These have been similar all along, but for the benefit of the group that may not have seen that presentation to the board. The process phases are listed here. There's 5 of them. The first phase was the preliminary value consulting, and that is complete. And that gave the opinion of value, the project feasibility, initial negotiations, and due diligence, which is completed. And then we met with the board and we asked to move on to phase 2, which is currently in progress. That's part where we engaged Pluris LLC and determine interest in sale, which we have done already, negotiations and public meetings. The negotiations have been currently between our consultant and Pluris. We haven't engaged Pluris formally. We have our group together and we plan on doing that fairly quickly. Phase 3 is where, just for the record, the way we set up the RFP with our Board of County Commissioners is that we would go back to them as we finish a phase for approval to move on to the next phase. Phase 3 would be where the formal appraisal would be done. That's where the majority of the money is for these phases. The opinion of value is not a formal appraisal. The formal appraisal would be done in phase 3. Phase 4, we would do community presentations and MSBU balloting. That's where we would do multiple community meetings. We'd engage our Orange County Comptroller for formal owner balloting. And then phase 5 would be the implementation of the acquisition. That's where we'd have some legal things, final agreement. We do a Chapter 125 hearing, funding applications, closing services, things like that, just for the benefit of the group to see where we're at in the process. Current assumptions. The current assumptions haven't changed much. I can tell you, I'll tell you where they have changed, if they have changed at all. But the assumptions would be that Orange County Utilities would own, operate, and replace existing facilities as required. There's significant cost uncertainty that exists in both the acquisition and the renewal and replacement cost. Since the value consulting that was done during phase 1 by our consultant, we call it a windshield analysis. They actually, when it came to the sites, they were driven through the sites by Pluris people. There was no detailed due diligence that will come later. Those are things that we can expound on later, but where you go and you assess pipes and all the infrastructure, and you do a detailed analysis of the quality and the age and the useful life of those types of systems. That complete system condition assessment would be required prior to determining cost above and beyond what we would negotiate during acquisition. And it's for the benefit of the group, it's worth saying that when you get to a pricing of what this utility is valued at, it would do no good for Pluris to provide us a price unless the Wedgefield residents are interested in buying it. It would just be an exercise. So unless it's a price that's reasonable to the Wedgefield folks, then again, it's not going to be worth doing. It has to be a price that would be a value that you would see value in. So the acquisition is subject to balloting. Costs of system acquisition and renewal replacement are going to be borne by the homeowners and assessed what we call a municipal services benefit unit, or MSBU. That is something that utilities in Orange County would go to the market and do some bond funding, and then we would finance the purchase, and then we would pass the costs off to each of the parcel owners through an MSBU on the tax rolls. The RFP, as I mentioned, again, requires board approval for all subsequent phases. And Pluris Wedgefield LLC, as I mentioned, has been engaged by our consultant, and as of now is a willing seller for the right price. And that's a little bit of a movement. When we first started, they really weren't interested in selling. So we've come off that. And there's also other movements that I'll talk about here in a moment. Just for the benefit of everyone, another one of our current assumptions is you can see from this page, you can see the parcel that's outlined in red. That's the Wedgefield parcels that we're talking about. And you can see the yellow kind of a south to northwest running road is State Road 520. And our closest infrastructure, Orange County Utilities' closest infrastructure that we can get to is down 520, and it's about 4.5 miles away. We do believe that growth will at some point work its way east. We have amazing growth in our western service area, which is the Horizons West 429 area, which is west of Walt Disney World that you may be familiar with. But we do believe with time, this 4.4 miles will become less and less and less. We can't quite understand how long that will take. The thing about utilities, we just serve development, and those type of decisions are made by our elected officials, and we don't have control over that. We just make sure that we're ready and available to provide services when that occurs. So as far as the pipe is approximately 5 miles away, and if we were to simply connect our system to the Pluris system that's out there, we would have the same high water age and some of the resulting issues. So we believe that's a bad idea. And also the cost of a 5 mile pipe is in the neighborhood of $20+ million. So it makes the economics of a purchase somewhat undoable. As we do grow out there in that area though, if as we get closer and closer, that cost would come down. Our thought is that we would own and operate the plant as it sits now, and run it by itself until such time as our infrastructure becomes closer and closer, and at that point we would do the connection. So the consultant phase 1 findings that we presented to the board, I'm going to present to you tonight. So the opinion of value that was done by the consultant took 3 approaches, and they're weighted approaches, and you'll see the weighting there. There was a cost approach. So what would it be to from a cost perspective, also from an income perspective, and then from comparable sales perspective. So what they found, what the consultant realized and found out, that from a cost perspective, the weighted result is about $13.2 million. If you take and that's a 65% weighting. The income, what it would actually generate is $4.2 million, and that has 25% rating or weighting. And comparable sales, which has the lowest weighting, because quite frankly, private utilities don't sell that often. There has been a few of them in Florida. There was a couple in Hillsborough County, and I think there may be some others that are in Hillsborough County, but that had the low weighting. So the phase 1 value consulting maximum price that the consultant put was about $19 million. And the market opinion consulting was 17.5. And we had initially thought, doing a back of the napkin analysis here at Utilities based on the annual reports from Pluris, that we were in the neighborhood of about 16.5 million. So we weren't far off, but this is not a formal, like I mentioned, value assessment. That won't be done until it's a later phase. So if you take this is also the consultant findings. If you take the $17.5 million purchase price, there's what we refer to as buckets of funding, and they have transactional costs, financing costs, renewal and replacement funds, rate stabilization funds, all the way down, which puts the acquisition price at about $25 million. So you take that $25 million roughly, and then we do some analysis with that $25 million, and we come up to where we would go of what it would cost for the homeowner, and we'll get to that in a moment. At the current, and that's without any negotiation whatsoever. That's Pluris obviously has come in with a very high number of about $30 million, and because we have ongoing negotiations with them now through our consultant, I'm not going to share where we are, but I can share that they've come off their initial high number and gotten to a point where we feel like meeting is going to be beneficial. So with the consultant phase 1 findings, They agreed that water quality and aesthetics, Pluris Wedgefield currently meets all the regulatory standards, that the high rates and pricing, they confirmed that Pluris Wedgefield rates are about 123% higher than our rates. So the current Pluris combined water wastewater bill for 7,000 gallons per month is about 167.44 versus Orange County's, which is 75.18. So that's where the difference of the 123% comes in. We use 7,000 gallons for a reason. The consultant findings showed that the Pluris, the Wedgefield residents collectively use about 5,000 gallons. In our experience, in our service area of over 1,000 square miles in Orange County, our customers use about 7. And we think anecdotally that if water was more affordable and less expensive, that the Wedgefield residents would use more water. And we've actually heard that from during our public meeting. So we use 7,000 because we believe that that number will be closer to what our average is. Quite frankly, you're on our eastern service area, so there wouldn't be too much reason to believe that you'd be any different than the other 1,000 square miles that we serve. But that's why we use 7,000 over the 5 that was in the consultant report. Orange County, this is a current Pluris rate that takes into account their 1.25% indexing that I mentioned. We have a rate increase that's scheduled to take effect October 1. That's not included in this analysis because we don't include rates that are not approved by our board yet. And those rates won't be approved by our board until later in the month. So for the benefit of the group, that's not included there. Facilities are considered to be in good condition. Again, I mentioned that was a windshield drive-through look. There hasn't been an intense engineering study that would need to be gone through and concluded. They did mention that there's no major maintenance or operations items identified by FDEP during their sanitary survey reports. He looked at the 2016 and the 2018 reports. There wasn't any 2020 reports yet. We did look for those prior to this meeting, but there's none out there yet. And from a customer service perspective, complaints have been responded to pursuant to the regulatory standards of the PSC. And the consultant went on to state that acquisition is not financially feasible without an MSBU and/or subsidy such as grants. And the consultant didn't add the bullet underneath the acquisition bullet. I did. We have not been able to qualify for or identify any grants, but we are still actively looking for grants. We've been working with the District 5 office, and anybody that would give us any discussion about grants to help pay for the acquisition. I can tell you that when we look at grants, we get into an ownership discussion whether or not, because technically we don't own the utility. We can't make improvements to a utility that we don't own. So the Pluris residents don't own it. Orange County doesn't own it. It's owned by a private company. So when we do own it, at that point, we would be more open to getting some grants, but we're not giving up and we're still actively looking. We want you guys to understand that. From a business perspective, the acquisition was not recommended by the consultant for various reasons. The systems they can't be integrated as they sit now with Orange County. And to put a layman's terms, the systems that they use for water treatment are currently incompatible with Orange County systems. They use a method of water treatment that's different than the way we treat water. So they couldn't be easily put together. And the operational costs to run that plant by itself out there is going to be more expensive as a standalone option. So, and we are all aware that there are other factors that are involved when you think about purchasing anything, quite frankly. There is a financial component, and there's also other non-financial components that are important. The folks out in Wedgefield are Orange County citizens. You're our constituents. You just happen to not be our customer at this point, but we are interested in trying to help facilitate whatever we can do. So there's other facets that the board is aware of and that Orange County Utilities are aware of that were not taken into account by the consultant. But from a financially feasible, pure perspective, it was not something that the consultant recommended. So from the owner cost estimate, the homeowner cost estimate's based on the cost of the MSBU, however much money that we end up financing. So we'll end up getting ultimately when we negotiate a purchase price. If that purchase price is something that the Wedgefield owners are interested in undertaking through a 20-year, what we call a 20-year MSBU, then we would move forward with that. The MSBU costs would be a factor. The other factor in that cost is the prevailing rates. We've plugged in a rate of 15% escalator on our Orange County rates to reflect the increased cost of operations as outlined by our consultant. We're not sure if that 15% is enough, but that's what we have in there now. We'll know that number better as we get down the road. And the outcome for homeowners depend on a couple things. Number one, the cost of the purchase, and number two, the usage. So the funny thing is, the way it works is the more water that's used, the more savings that the Wedgefield owner could realize. So to put it into perspective, an Orange County bill for that 7,000, as I mentioned before, is $75.18. The MSBU cost, the factors are a 20-year term. We have a 5% interest built in. We believe, depending on the rates of the market, that we can get a much more competitive rate than 5%, but we have that as a placeholder. That equates to, at a purchase price of $25 million, which we outlined earlier, that gives us an MSBU, or a monthly MSBU, of $93.48. So each homeowner would pay an additional $93.48 for that MSBU over a 20-year period. That subtotal of what our bill would be, the MSBU would put you at $168.66 per month, and you're currently paying with Pluris $167.44. So it would be an increase currently, as it sits at $25 million with the factors that we have built in, that it would cost each homeowner about $1.22 more per month. As we negotiate, we believe that we'll get a preferential price and this number will come down. We believe, but again, that's our belief. And that concludes the length of my presentation. I can open it up. I'll stop sharing, and then I'll kick it back to the commissioner, and we can try to answer any questions that the group may have.
All right, thank you, Tim, for the presentation. We do have some questions that came in, and I will try to answer these here. So the first question was, who is holding Pluris for the quality of their water?
That's a good question. That's a good question, and thank you for that question. And as I mentioned in the regulatory for the water quality and the operations of the Pluris plant is the responsibility of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, FDEP. That's the regulatory agency. For the pricing of the Pluris utility, it's the Florida Public Service Commission. So there's two Florida agencies that have jurisdiction over Pluris now. The one benefit that multiple Wedgefield folks have communicated to me and to District 5 over the period of years is, the one thing about that wasn't mentioned in the presentation is that as a constituent of Orange County, if you were to become a Orange County Utilities customer, we're governed and by the Board of County Commissioners. So you would have representation of 6 county commissioners and a single county commissioner in your district, which happens to be Emily Bonilla. So you would have your legislation and your commissioners and folks would not be in Tallahassee; they would be here locally. So from that perspective, it would be you'd have accountable people here that that have responsibility over the way we run Orange County Utilities. So that's a very good question.
Yes, at that point, they could blame me for everything.
Well, they could blame all of us, and we're
Yeah,
accountable. So
exactly. The board makes the decision together, not just one commissioner.
that's right.
The question, I believe the whole presentation answered it, was what will it take of Orange County to take over the operation? And that's what this whole presentation covered. We do have a representative from Congressman Bill Posey's office watching this, Cheryl Moore, and she had requested some documents, and Tim, I had given her your email address that she can email you and request those documents.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
This looks like more of a statement than a question, but Pluris has already stated that they have replaced and upgraded all of their major infrastructure. The cost, which has already been paid for by residents, cost increases as approved by the PSC. I don't know if you can state whether that's true or not.
Can you
I don't believe
that?
they've replaced everything.
Yeah, I can't answer that. We won't know until we get into negotiations with Pluris and they allow us to bring our engineering group on site to do some deeper assessments. We know that it's 1960s infrastructure. In our experience, those things need to be replaced. At some point, they have a useful life. I do know that Pluris has made some changes out at their facilities, the way they treat water and some other things. And I do know that they also have a price increase that they're working on currently. I don't know when that's scheduled to take effect, but when that does take effect, that will change the economics of it. Actually, better. The economics will be better, and the variance between the costs will be better.
Okay, and another question. This is an interesting question, but didn't you say that Pluris acquisition costs will be passed on to all current customers? Wouldn't that mean the residents own it if we are paying for it?
The way it's always been envisioned, we're a water utility. We have experience and expertise in running water utilities. How it would go, because Pluris is a private water utility that has the Pluris area. It's actually the Pluris area around there is in the Orange County utility service area. So once it was purchased, we believe it needs to be purchased by the residents, and that's the way this is has always been envisioned, that it would be purchased by the residents and that it would be ultimately owned and operated. The county would finance it with bond funding through our AAA bond rating and things like that. We would fund it, and then we would pass that cost back to each resident over a period of time, which we have currently as a 20-year MSBU. So the Pluris residents, the Wedgefield residents would get access to us running the facility, to upgrades and things like that. Once we take ownership of a location, we have acquired various small utilities over time, and we would program any future things after acquisition that would need to be replaced would be covered by the utility. We would never go back to the Pluris, to Wedgefield owners in the future for any upgrades to any of those facilities once they were paid for and owned by us. So it would just be the upfront costs of the acquisition, which are significant.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that it would really belong to residents, and everything that the county government owns is owned by the taxpayers.
Yeah, by de facto, yes.
Yeah. So another question, what has FDEP said about water quality?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of FDEP. They're an agency that that is in charge of the water quality of Pluris. Our consultant did speak as far as their understanding that they were in compliance with FDEP currently.
And I just want to quickly mention that if you have any questions, you could type them in at the Q&A section in here, because I still see the same people asking questions. So I just wanted to let others know how to do that. Another question, Pluris has rates almost 6 times higher than Miami and almost twice as expensive as OCU. How does the county commissioner think they can assist when clearly the Public Service Commission can't even help with yearly rate increases?
So one of the things that had been brought up numerous times by various Wedgefield homeowners, they've been part of a private utility that is a for-profit company. They continue to get rate increases, and they're not happy with the spikes that you've been getting over the years. I actually did an analysis of all the rate increases for you folks from 2006 to current, and there have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 7 or 8 rate increases, larger rate increases over time. Some of them have not been very big. Some of them have been what we consider rate spikes. The point of an acquisition, one of the points of an acquisition, is getting a utility like Orange County Utilities that knows what it takes to service a customer, know what it takes to be a partner with customers. That's what you would get. Also, any future rate increases, once you're an Orange County Utilities customer, go through the Board of County Commissioners through our annual budget process. And that bar is something that's pretty high. You have elected officials that are beholden to you as customers and as constituents of Orange County. So right now, as it sits, you have a private utility that you're governed by a PSC out of Tallahassee. So you have no local representation. So that's one of the positives of a potential purchase and acquisition, is to get you representation, number one, by your elected officials, and get control over these large rate spikes that seem to not be ebbing, and also get a utility like Orange County that can service you in a way that treats you well and also is a partner and listens. I mean, when you call our call center, we have a less than 2-minute service level agreement where you call, we answer the telephone, we answer the questions, we do very well at those types of things. That's our core competency. So that's one of the things that's been mentioned in the past. The level of service that you're currently getting is, in your opinion, substandard. I'm not saying that. That's what you've communicated to me and others through various meetings. So those are some of the things that are less tangible. They're not financial, but those are things that you'll gain potentially from an acquisition. I don't want it to sound self-serving, because as Orange County Utilities, you're county constituents, but you're not our customer. So we're ready and available. And if the decision is made by our elected officials, the decision makers in Orange County, to negotiate and do a potential purchase, and Orange County Utilities will be ready to do the service and do the transition and do whatever it takes to transition you as customers. If that happens, we'll do whatever it takes.
Okay, another question is, the MSBU is very high, and the way it was presented doesn't seem very attractive, even if it goes down a few dollars after negotiations. What about federal funding? There are federal grants available for private utilities to be acquired by public utilities. Well, I will just say a couple of things and pass it on to you, Tim. But I have visited. I've been to DC and visited our Congress members, including Bill Posey, who represents this area. And from Bill Posey, he didn't really bring up any grants, and said if I find anything, that to let him know. But definitely I haven't been able to find anything, and I have gone to it's called grants.gov, and there hasn't been anything I've found. But if anyone finds anything, let us know, and we'll definitely try to go for that grant. But like Tim had said earlier in the presentation, there's not typically grants for private utilities, but after we own it, there are grants that can help with infrastructure improvements. I've been consistently looking for grants, and I'll tell you, just haven't found any. But Tim, what have you found?
The same thing. We've had some staff members that work with grants, looking for grants, and they haven't had any luck, similar to what you're talking about. And what I mentioned in my presentation, we had a very detailed discussion with a grant that we asked questions about, and it came down to the ownership, and it dovetails with what the commissioner said about private utilities. So I believe after the fact, after a purchase, we would be able to potentially get grants for any types of improvements or some improvements. But any grant that would be given, and we will continue to look, would just drive that number down. So it's prudent for the homeowners, for District 5, for utilities to try to find any grants we potentially can. Everybody benefits from that if that occurs. So we believe that that's a good plan. We just haven't, to this point, haven't found anything that would bear any fruit.
Okay, the next question is, if Park Manor was the last county acquisition, how does this acquisition compare? Notwithstanding the proximity of Park Manor, and then they have another question, which I'll just ask now as well. Secondly, what is the timeline approximately based on only being in phase 2?
Yeah, I don't have specific information on Park Manor. I know we've done some utility work in Park Manor. I can get that data. I don't know exactly what folks are looking for. I don't know if they're an apples to apples comparison. I would have to do some research on Park Manor. Tad, do you have any just a general understanding of Park Manor from a utilities infrastructure perspective?
Yeah, I don't know the history of the Park Manor, the acquisition. I do know that we've had to invest a lot of improvement money into their existing water lines, their distribution system, and then in addition to their collection system. But as far as, if they had a water facility that they owned before, Park Manor is in the middle of our distribution system, so it was a matter of just direct connection to our water system. There was no water age situation or anything like that. But the utility as a whole, that subdivision, that area, has had significant rehabilitation needed. So.
What was the second part of that question, Commissioner?
What is the timeline approximately based on only being in phase 2? So I think the question's asking, we're in phase 2, how long will it take to get through all the rest of the phases to completion?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you how long that takes. We've been working diligently on it. I think the timeline kind of shows you what we've been working on. I would be remiss if I gave you a date or a time or a potential. We're going to engage Pluris. The next steps is to take the group that we've had to engage Pluris to see if they're truly interested in an acquisition. If they are, we're going to try to negotiate the best price possible. And then we'll come back to the parcel homeowners in Wedgefield and determine if that's a price that you're willing to move forward with. And if at that point you're not willing to move forward with that price, then it's a moot point. So I couldn't tell you. I know that negotiations can take some time. Once we do negotiations, there's going to have to, if we do agree, we're going to have to do some balloting. There's going to have to be a formal appraisal done by our consultant. There's going to have to be significant engineering work to determine the state of the plants and the infrastructure, which takes time. But I would be remiss to try to give a date. I've been working diligently on this probably since April of 2016. So it's been several years. It's probably going to be 3 or 4 several years longer to get the things that we have to get done. But I couldn't put a date out there. But it is a very valid question.
Thank you. Another question, how long will it take for water quality to improve after the purchase?
And that's also a very good question. So it's a very astute question, because if we run the plant as it's currently run now in place, we're going to have some of the same challenges as the utility that runs it currently. So for the benefit of everybody on the call, we want to make sure that you do clearly understand that if we were to purchase it, it's not going to be an overnight switch that's going to be flipped that, okay, now Orange County owns it. The things that you complain about in the future are going to be fixed overnight. That's not going to be the case. And we want to be completely transparent and upfront with you about that point. Secondly, we do have things that are in our arsenal that we can do to improve water quality. I'll give you one example. We had some water quality concerns, if you're familiar with the area, in around the SeaWorld area. What we did was we brought in a private company that did what's called ice pigging. And it sounds like a crazy term, but what they do is we put an ice slurry into the water distribution piping and run through high pressure that ice, and that ice scours the inside of pipes, and we flush those pipes after they've been scoured. That's a technology that's relatively new. It was out of the UK. There's a company that does it here called Suez in the United States. We did that very favorably in the what's the name of that subdivision, Tad? It begins with over by SeaWorld.
I am drawing a blank.
The name of it escapes me, but it was a very large subdivision.
It's the Wood subdivision.
Orangewood and some other subdivisions right around the world, but they were some locations or a bunch of different subdivisions that had been on the distribution system for quite some time, and we were able to quantify some of the scouring that we did and what we were able to remove from the system. So we envision that things like that are things that we could do, not just flushing programs, because water, we found, does a decent job flushing pipes, but when you leverage something like the ice pigging technology, where you in essence take ice, which is cold and very somewhat abrasive to the inside of the pipe, can get a lot of residue and things off the inside of pipe without having to move it. But that's something that we could potentially do. And there's other things that we could do as well. So we would work diligently. If we were to purchase, we would obviously, number one, we would not want to field water quality complaints from Wedgefield customers on a daily basis. That was something that we would never want to do that. We would want to do everything possible to maintain the system in a way that you would be proud of it and we'd be proud of it. And what we're providing to you it meets your expectations. That would always be the case. But overnight it wouldn't change. It would ultimately, we'd have to leverage some technologies to get it to where it needs to be, maybe some infrastructure changes, some upgrades and updates. And then ultimately we would connect it to our system, as I mentioned, when that 5 miles becomes, 3, 2, 1, and as development works toward the eastern portion of our service area.
I have a follow-up.
So-
It was the Williamsburg subdivision, and it's the Orangewood water treatment plant.
That's right.
Okay, so we have about 4 minutes on the hour, if we want to keep this at an hour. So we have very questions, and I'm going to try to join some of these questions. So some of these questions are really good. So it's like, it's going to take 20 years. They're asking to see any cost savings. And if someone moves in those 20 years, who then pays that? And if more homeowners move into the area, will that bring the cost down? So I think those are all kind of those questions into one here.
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe the way it would work is we're through an MSBU on the tax rolls for that parcel. So we mentioned about 1,800 parcels, give or take. We were able to quantify about 1,765 parcels. So each parcel owner would get an MSBU for a period of time, which we figure is going to be about 20 years. And that would be paid over the 20-year period. If that house is transacted and sold, that MSBU would remain with that parcel and would be something that would be open to the owner of the new, that would be the purchaser. As far as I haven't gotten my hands around potentially new parcels, I think the area we're talking about is pretty built out. When I did look at the aerials and look at the property appraiser website, there is some vacant parcels, but they're not a lot. But they would be probably considered in with this as well. We would have to, we're going to assess even vacant land. So there's owners of vacant properties. So those vacant properties would be assessed the MSBU as well. So we believe we hit everybody, and everybody would pay their equal fair share, regardless of whether or not they were a homeowner or a business owner. They would all be assessed the MSBU.
Okay. And a lot of the other questions were answered in the presentation, so I'm going to skip over those. But there's one other question. Are there any other communities within Orange County that are being forced to buy a utility company in order to have usable drinking water?
There are very small, a few private utilities that still are in Orange County operating. There's some, like a handful, like less than 5. But nothing to the size of Pluris. There's no others in Orange County that I'm aware of. There's just maybe 3 or 4 small ones. Utilities Inc. Is a company that operates in Orange County. They run 2 smalls. One's in the area of Windermere off the top of my head, and there's another one close to Good Homes Road in Ocoee. And then there's another private utility that's run in Desiree Ranch, which is Osceola and Orange County, portions of Orange County, that's run by Desiree Ranch, just would be south and west of Wedgefield.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Well, all the other questions have been answered in the presentation or answered within questions that were asked. So I believe we got through all the questions. So thank you, everyone, for participating in this virtual meeting. Thank you, Tim and Todd, for your presentation, for being here answering these questions, and thank you for the great questions that we received. So I will end this presentation now, and someone just said thank you. So yes, I will end this presentation now. Have a great rest of your evening, and this will be provided by recording on my YouTube channel, and we will put it in our newsletter as well. And we'll try to put this up on social media. So we'll try to get this video out there as much as possible for you all to share it. So again, thank you so much and have a good evening. And we are going to end this meeting. Thank you.